what we want to talk about is what everyday life, what history was like, what the experiences of colonial America were like for people like you and me. Ordinary people who lived through this. So we're not going to talk today a lot about people like George Washington or Benjamin Franklin or some of these people that you all study about in your textbooks. Instead, we're going to talk about what life was like for people like you. Ordinary kids living in colonial America. So with that in mind, I want to start off with a few ground rules, historical ground rules. The first thing that you need to remember is that the past is a foreign country. And in foreign countries, they do things differently, right? Now, if someday you ever go to a foreign country, if you ever lived in a foreign country, you know that they have different ways of life, different language, different culture, different belief systems than we perhaps have in the United States of America. We can all agree on that, right? When you go to visit a foreign country, one of the things that you want to do, unless you're going to be a really rude visitor, right, you're going to want to try to understand that country. Now, the same applies to history, the past. That's a foreign country as well. And what I want to do today with you is I want to take you into the foreign country of colonial America. Now, granted, the colonies are here in North America where we live, so it's not as if we're going geographically to a different country. But we are going to a different world where they did things differently. What I want you to do now is I want you to try to imagine yourself, put yourself, we're no longer in 21st century Milwaukee. I want you to put yourself into the 17th and 18th centuries of colonial America, and I want you to think as a kid with me. I'm going to help you think as a kid about what that experience would be like. So the first question you need to ask yourself, what kind of kid are you? Because depending on your background, depending on your race, depending on where you live in colonial America, you may have a different childhood experience, right? We have the children of the covenant, the tobacco kids, the tender plants, the native sons and daughters, and the child of slavery. Now, some of you may know your history, so you might want to think about that. You know, where do I fit? How is my life either similar or different from all of these different types of children who lived in colonial America? So let's start with the children of the covenant. The children of the covenant come from the region in colonial America known as New England. Now, some of you may be familiar with New England. Some of the states or the colonies of New England were places like Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, up there in the north, where some of the early settlements in America took place. This New England society that they created, that the settlers created, is very, very strange compared to the kind of society that we live in today. The Puritans, who were the ones who settled in this area, have you ever heard of the Puritans? Right? You've studied them. Who settled in this area, wanted to create a society that was pleasing to God. That was a godly society, a Christian society. They were all Christians. And they wanted to create almost like a utopia. You know what a utopia is? An ideal society based upon the teachings of the Bible. So the laws, for example, were based upon the teachings of the Bible. And you could get punished in this society for violating certain laws because they contradicted the teachings of the Bible. So, for example, some of you may have heard of the Scarlet Letter, that novel, right? If you committed adultery, you could be killed or imprisoned for the rest of your life in Puritan New England. If you didn't go to church every Sunday, you could be fined. And if you kept not going, you could end up in jail. So again, this is a very different society than the one we live in today. These Puritans are trying to create an ideal, godly, Christian world in New England. So, with that in mind, what then would have childhood been like in this society? If you were living in this society, what would your day-to-day life probably be like? Well, the first thing that you would have to remember, if you were a child in Puritan New England, always remember, you are a sinner. Now, because you grow up in this society, you adopt the beliefs of this society. The Puritans believed that when Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of the tree in the creation, the Garden of Eden, the creation story, following the creation story, they sinned against God. And as a result, every single person born following that also is born as a sinner, separated from God, destined to spend eternity away from God. Now, today, you might learn about things like that in your churches. I don't know what your religious backgrounds are. But you need to realize this is a society in which virtually everyone believed this. Thus, when children are born, they are born in sin, before they've even had a chance to do anything wrong. That's what the Puritans believed. They were guilty before they even did anything. Now, ultimately, if you're born and you're separated from God, what might you want to try to do? Make yourself right with God somehow, right? Now, how do you make yourself right with God? Well, this is the life of a Puritan child. First of all, you're born with sin. That means you're always prone to do things wrong. So, Puritans would look at babies and how, maybe you have a younger brother or sister, or a cousin or something who's a baby. Babies, the Puritans would say, always get what they want, right? They scream, they yell, they don't care about, anything else. All they want, if they want their food, they want it now, they're selfish, right? Well, the Puritans say, well, they're selfish because of their sin. They were born this way. And the only way they can get right from God is to be saved, right? To have a Christian conversion experience. So if you're a child, you as a child in Puritan New England, are constantly thinking about the ways in which someday you're going to have this religious experience, this conversion experience, where you are made right before God by believing in the death of Jesus on the cross for your sins in this sense. And this is what this society believed. If you did not have this conversion experience when you got older, you couldn't vote. You couldn't run for office. You couldn't do anything in this society unless you were converted, at least unless you had this religious experience. So imagine this. I said this to your teachers yesterday. Imagine this. You turn 18 and you're allowed to vote, right, in the 21st century. So you go down to register to vote, and the official there at the courthouse or wherever you have to go says to you, well, tell me about how you got saved. Tell me about your conversion experience. Tell me how you made your life right with God. And they're not going to let you do that. They're not going to let you vote until they're convinced that you're right, that what you said is right. Again, very different from our own society. So the goal of parents is to try to break that sin out of you, to break your will. Sometimes they may use corporal punishment. Do you know what corporal punishment is? They may hit you with something to do that. They may make sure that you can no longer act in selfish ways, and in that sense you want to turn your life and turn your heart towards God. That's what the Puritans believed about how to raise children, and that's how you would have been brought up. Now, I'm guessing some of you may say, whew, I'm glad I don't live in that society, right? But if you lived in that society at that time, that was what you would have experienced. Remember, the past is a foreign country, folks. They do things differently there, and especially they did things differently in colonial New England.